And so that's where I am. And so then I decided to make a switch because I realized what's going on nationally. When I saw that the Biden-Harris administration was suing to overturn Title IX protections for women and trying to change the trying to change the word protections based on sex to gender, right, which would essentially include men who identify as women. I realized then that I had to get involved and I could never win this battle on the other side, the side that I was in, the Democrat side. People said, well, if you had won your seat, what would you do? Well, I thought at the time that if I did win, that I could continue to keep trying to fight and make change. But now they've doubled down, tripled down, quadrupled down. So I could never effectuate change as a Democrat. So I switched parties. I made the announcement at the Moms for Liberty National Summit in Washington, D.C., in front of a room of maybe 1,000 people. And so I assume you watched it remotely. And you're right, it went viral. I would say nationally, but then I had a friend send me a copy of the India Times or the Times of India. And they're like, Representative, you're on the cover of the newspaper in India. And I was like, what? So, but people, I'll say by and large, Riley, are grateful. They're sending me wonderful support for taking a bold, courageous stand. And I always tell people, I never wanted to be known for taking a stand for something that really shouldn't require courage. I'll accept it because that's where we are right now. But when did it become courageous to say that a biological man can't have a baby? When did it become courageous to say a biological man isn't 5 to 10 times stronger than a woman?
Hi guys, welcome back to the channel. So one of the most concerning moments in the fight for women's sports was when not a single Democrat signed the Protection of Women and Girls in Sports Act. When it was put to a vote, all 51 Democrats voted against it, despite testimonies from people like Peyton McNabb, who was injured as a result of playing against a male volleyball player. She got spiked and she's still suffering from injuries to this day, including partial paralysis.
What would the president say to parents out there who have daughters, let's say from high school, for example, who are worried that their daughter may have to compete against a male and worry about their daughter's safety?
That is a dangerous thing to say, that essentially transgender kids we're talking about are dangerous.
I know you're in high school. I grant you that. But what do you think about a comment like that, saying it's dangerous after what you experienced?
I think it's very hypocritical. I think she's taken what others have said about how this is dangerous for us, and she's essentially switched it around and played the victim from the situation, which I expect nothing less from that whole administration. So, you know.
I just want to end with this question because I noticed that you said that you're not here in New York for yourself, and you didn't speak out for yourself. Tell us why you are doing this. Why does this matter to you?
So I'm doing this because I don't want anyone else to have to ever go through what I went through. And even the thought of it happening to my younger sister who's going into high school, or, you know, my other family members, my teammates, if that happened to any of them, it would just infuriate me. So just the thought of that, and I just don't think this is something that we should even have to be talking about.
Despite that, they all voted against it, sending a message to us that they don't care about women in sports. They don't care about the safety and fairness of women's sports. The act was to preserve Title IX's protections for female athletes to ensure safety and fairness. At the time, Riley Gaines said, "Every House Democrat just voted to keep men in women's sports, put men in women's bathrooms and locker rooms, house men in women's dorms, control your speech, and demand the language by which you call these men. Every single Democrat, even those with daughters of their own. Evil."
Yeah, we were able to protect the Women's and Girls in Sports Act early last year that passed the House. What was shocking was not a single Democrat voted for that bill that simply says that we want to keep women's sports, Congress in the 70s created Title IX specifically to give women their own avenue to be able to play on their own playing field. So the fact that every single Democrat thinks that we should have biological men competing in women's sports, not just at the high school level, at the college level, competing for scholarships. I mean, we've all seen the Riley Gaines, Leah Thomas thing. We've all seen this, in the beginning, about 5 years ago, the Democrats would say, oh, this never happens. And now just about every time you turn on the TV or read something in a sports blog or something, you see that this is happening in wrestling. You see that this is happening now in boxing.
So look, I haven't held out much hope for Democrats to come to their senses when it comes to this issue. But Riley Gaines has spoken about how Democrats have come up to her and said that they agree with her. They've come up to her and said that they support her, but they can't do so publicly.
Yeah, I mean, you, I'm sure, have faced attacks. And I want you to know, too, you expressed how some people, some of your colleagues would share to you maybe in private, we agree with you, but we can't lose our seat or whatever the stipulation was. That's something I hear in every state. I mean, even at the national level, I've had Democrat senators before I testified before the Senate or Congress who would come up to me and said, hey, look, I played sports. I played college sports. I have a daughter. I totally agree with you. And then would get on the other side of the table and absolutely grill me. So understand that is something.
Yeah, the hypocrisy is real.
One Democrat who did do so publicly apparently got a lot of harassment because of it.
Your experience, it reminds me a lot of a representative in Kansas, actually. His name is Marvin Robinson, and it was, very similar, where the women's sports bill came up. They had tried for 3 sessions. They couldn't get it through. The way their legislative body is broken up, they needed every single Republican to vote in favor to override the governor's veto. 2 Republicans, 1 Republican actually, I think it was 2 Republicans decided that they weren't going to vote for women's sports, and 1 lone Democrat by the name of Marvin Robinson, he stood firm. He said, this is crazy. He was a black man. He was, the most gracious, kind person you could possibly imagine. But for taking that stand, and then thereafter on other bills like you're describing with yourself, the Democratic Party, they ousted him. They called for him to step down. They had, advocacy groups getting involved and threatening him. They removed him from his office. They literally took out his stationery things. They took away his office. He didn't have an office in the Capitol anymore. Really crazy stuff. And I think back to when I was present at the ceremonial signing in Texas for the Save Women's Sports Act. And I remember the vitriol that I was met with by community members and different things. We were...
And these are supposed to be the people who are tolerant, right?
Isn't that hilarious? They say they're tolerant and they say they're accepting and welcoming and they embrace diversity. Well, guess what? They did not embrace my diverse thought.
Many of them don't want to lose their seats. They don't want the backlash. They don't want their constituents to turn against them, even though this is a simple, common sense approach. And now we have Katy Stamper, a candidate for the US House of Representatives for Georgia. She is the first Democratic candidate to sign Riley Gaines' Stand with Women scorecard. And I, for one, think this is a great development. These issues shouldn't really be partisan. They should just be based on what's fair, what's right, what is rooted in reality, basic common sense. So she's the first politician who's running on a Democratic ticket to sign this scorecard. So the scorecard is a first of its kind resource that scores every candidate for federal office on whether they intend to support legislation that preserves female opportunities and private spaces. The goal of this tool is to hold leaders accountable for their votes and stances on women's sex-based rights. So Stamper, who is running against Republican incumbent Barry Loudermilk, said she is grateful for the opportunity to join Gaines' scorecard, making it crystal clear to Georgians who stand with women. Our culture has abandoned young girls, refusing to acknowledge their God-given differences with boys and men, and subjecting them to the superior strength of biological males in their sports and in their locker rooms. We have let them down by making them forfeit games, losing their sports or abandon their sports, in order to avoid the disadvantages and dangers of such differences. mean, she said in an interview that this is a common sense issue, but unfortunately, those in power have turned it into a political issue. Democratic leadership has decided to cobble together different small groups in order to form a voting bloc. And this is one of the groups. They say, well, there's a small percentage out there of people. Sometimes, as we saw in 2020, you win by less than 1 or 2%, you win by 1/4% or 0.5%. So I think the reason they're trying to work with them and advance these unfortunate interests is because they are trying to corral them as a voting bloc. And to a large extent, it has worked. Wow. She is just exposing the Dems. But we know this. Despite the fact that her party as a whole disagrees with her stance, Stamper said she isn't worried about how voters will view her in November. It will hurt me with a very small percentage of people, but that, in and of itself, is not important to me. I'm much more concerned with speaking about this so that people understand the underlying cause of it. It being the trend of allowing biological males into women's sports and private spaces. And she said that she has the utmost compassion for transgender individuals, and she acknowledges that many of them have suffered from trauma, abuse, and mental health issues. It's her belief that anyone who had suffered from trauma of any kind as a child should be afforded the opportunity to attend therapy at no cost to him or herself. It's not bigotry. It's a mental health issue and should be addressed accordingly and very aggressively. Whatever help they want, they should get it. It's just a very sad thing that their families or our culture at large let them down when they were their most vulnerable. You have to acknowledge biological reality, and you cannot change reality just because some folks suffer trauma. It's really a shame these young girls are having to come out and defend themselves. The adults should be doing this. They know they should be doing it. They're just afraid. Wise words there. And Riley Gaines, obviously very happy to receive the first Democrat to sign her scorecard. She said the first Democrat running for Congress, Katy Stamper, has signed the Riley Gaines Stand with Women Scorecard. Thrilled to see this. Protecting women's rights shouldn't be partisan. I vow to stand with women and invite other Democrats and independents to join me. So if you're a Democrat, a liberal, leaning left, are you happy to hear that a Democratic candidate in Georgia has signed Riley Gaines' scorecard and supports women's sports and just sees it as a common sense issue rather than making it all about politics? Obviously, it has been turned into a political issue, and I do think that it's at the point where women are collateral damage in this power struggle. And unfortunately, some politicians are perfectly happy to allow women to be collateral damage, to allow girls to be collateral damage when it comes to their sex-based rights. And meanwhile, they tell us that they're the party for women. And this candidate, she is in Georgia. So do you think this is going to hurt her campaign? Do you think she's just thrown away her chance of winning? Or could this be something that is a step in the right direction that will bring on board those very people as well who are more moderate? But it was pointed out that it's very odd that in 2024, it's considered brave to state fact. It is what it is. So I'm glad people are brave to speak out about this, especially if you're a Democrat. Apparently it takes more bravery from them to speak out. And it's very sad that standing up for women, standing up for girls, could harm your campaign if you're a Democrat. And I hope more politicians sign Riley's scorecard so that we know where to look to see where a candidate stands. And let me know what you think. Thanks for watching. Like, comment and subscribe. Take care of yourselves, and God willing, I will see you in the next video.